Nathan and Emily Whitaker were the kind of couple people admired from a distance, successful, generous, and always smiling. With two bright children and a picture-perfect home in Maple Hollow, they seemed to embody the American dream. But beneath their polished image hid a chilling darkness no one could have imagined. When the children were found dead in their beds and the parents vanished without a trace, a horrifying truth began to unravel, revealing that behind the Whitakers' flawless facade was a web of secrets, control, and an obsession that would shock the entire nation. In the peaceful town of Maple Hollow, nestled between quiet hills and tree-lined streets, the Whitaker family stood out as a symbol of everything good. Nathan Whitaker was a highly respected surgeon at the local hospital. He saved lives, trained young interns, and often gave free consultations to families who couldn't afford treatment. His wife, Emily, was just as beloved. As a third-grade teacher, she brought warmth to the classroom, always patient, always kind. Their children, Liam and Sophie, were polite, well-behaved, and bright students. The family attended church every Sunday, hosted school fundraisers, and frequently posted cheerful family moments online. Whether it was carving pumpkins in the fall or building snowmen in winter, the Whitakers appeared to be living the ideal American life. Neighbors admired them. The Whitaker house, a charming two-story home with white shutters and a well-kept garden, often echoed with laughter. It was common to see Nathan mowing the lawn with Liam beside him, or Emily reading to Sophie on the porch swing. People talked about them like they were a modern-day fairy tale. Other parents looked up to them, believing the Whitakers had figured out the secret to balancing work, family, and happiness. No one ever questioned what happened behind their closed doors. Why would they? Everything looked perfect, but sometimes appearances deceive. There were small details easy to ignore, but hard to forget once noticed. The way Emily seemed thinner every year, her smile a little tighter, the fact that the Whitakers had canceled their last two vacations with no clear reason. Nathan, usually so composed, had started withdrawing from hospital committees. Once a man who offered cheerful greetings, he now rushed through the hallways, avoiding eye contact. Friends chalked it up to stress. After all, life gets busy. Still, something about their carefully curated perfection seemed almost to control, too polished. But no one asked questions. They were too focused on their own lives to dig deeper. That's why, when both Nathan and Emily failed to show up for work on the same morning, alarm bells rang. First came confusion, then worry. Multiple phone calls went unanswered. Colleagues and friends reached out with growing concern. A welfare check was requested by a colleague at the hospital, who admitted he hadn't seen Nathan in nearly a week. What the responding officers would find behind the doors of the Whitaker home would expose a nightmare no one had imagined, unraveling the image of the perfect family that had fooled everyone for years. The officers arrived at the Whitaker home just after noon. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows over the neatly trimmed lawn. Everything looked undisturbed, no broken windows, no signs of forced entry. A delivery package sat untouched on the front porch, but the house was locked, and no one responded to repeated knocks. Neighbors watched from their porches as the officers circled the property, checking each window, looking for anything unusual. Finally, they obtained permission to enter. The front door was forced open, and the first step inside revealed an unsettling stillness. The living room was tidy, almost too tidy. A coffee mug sat half full on the side table, and a faint scent of lavender cleaner still hung in the air. The TV was on, displaying a frozen screen from a paused children's cartoon. There was no noise, no footsteps upstairs, No movement in the kitchen, no voices, just silence. The dining table was still set for 4, the plates untouched. A roast had been cooked, but never served. It was beginning to spoil. As the officers moved through the house, each room added to their unease. Everything was in place, but there was a strange, hollow feeling that grew with every step. Upstairs, they found Liam and Sophie in their beds. Both children were lying peacefully beneath their blankets, eyes closed, expressions calm, as if they had simply fallen asleep. But the chill in the room and the paleness of their skin told a different story. They had been dead for at least 2 days. No injuries were visible. It wasn't until the coroner's report came back later that the truth was confirmed. Both had been poisoned with a fast-acting and traceable sedative. The parents were nowhere to be found. Their phones were missing, and their wallets, IDs, and even toothbrushes were gone. Only a few items had been left behind, almost as if their absence had been carefully planned. Surveillance footage from nearby houses showed nothing unusual in the days leading up to the discovery. No one had seen them leave. No cars were heard in the night. The family car was still in the driveway. Investigators began to consider the possibility that this wasn't a break-in or a robbery gone wrong, but something far more sinister. The children had been put to bed and poisoned without resistance. There were no signs of struggle, no signs of panic. It looked almost ritualistic. And if the children had been dead for 2 days, the question grew louder with each passing hour: where were Nathan and Emily? The search for answers led investigators deeper into the Whitaker home, room by room, drawer by drawer. On the surface, everything reflected the life of a loving family. Family portraits lined the walls, children's drawings hung on the fridge. School books and board games were stacked neatly in the living room. But the more they looked, the more they sensed something wasn't right. In the basement, tucked behind a set of storage shelves, they found a locked door, one that didn't appear on the original floor plans of the house. It was reinforced from the inside, like a panic room, but it didn't look like it had ever been used for protection. When they forced the door open, what they found was disturbing. The room was dimly lit, with a single desk lamp casting shadows across the walls. Every surface was covered with files, notes, photos, and maps. The faces of local women stared out from pinned-up photographs, most of them unaware they'd been watched. Dates, times, and locations were recorded in obsessive detail. Investigators found surveillance footage, printouts of text messages, and even scraps of clothing. All of it was neatly organized and labeled by year. Among the disturbing collection was a notebook filled entirely in Nathan's handwriting. It appeared to be a journal, but not the kind one would expect. He wrote about purity, control, and a higher calling. He described the need to cleanse the world of corruption and protect his family from outside influence. His words were methodical, cold, and calculated. There was no mention of remorse, only justification. Emily's presence in the room was less clear at first, but beneath the loose floor panel they discovered a hidden compartment containing several handwritten letters. These were different: emotional, hesitant, and personal. They were addressed to no one, more like private confessions than messages. Emily spoke of fear, of realizing too late who she had married. She described moments of hope followed by terror. She tried to leave once, but Nathan had threatened her and the children. In one of the final entries, she wrote, "He watches everything, even me." And in the last letter, dated just days before the children's deaths, she wrote a line that froze the entire investigative team. "I tried to stop him, but now, all I can do is wait." That discovery shattered any remaining illusions. What had seemed like a perfect home was now undeniably a place of obsession, fear, and secrets buried deep beneath the surface. The nationwide search for Nathan and Emily Whitaker quickly gained media attention. Their story, once one of community pride, turned into a haunting mystery that captivated the country. News stations replayed footage of the smiling family at church events, at school assemblies, and walking hand in hand at local festivals. Now those same images served as eerie reminders of what was lost. The couple had seemingly vanished without a trace. Their phones had been disabled, their social media accounts deleted, and no digital footprint remained. Detectives tracked every lead, but most ended in dead ends. Weeks passed, then months. Hope of finding them alive, or even finding them at all, began to fade. Then came the first breakthrough. A park ranger stumbled upon an abandoned SUV deep in a wooded area near the state border, almost 60 miles from Maple Hollow. The vehicle was registered to Nathan. Inside, officers found several personal belongings, an empty thermos, a pair of muddy shoes, and a photograph taped to the dashboard. It was a picture of the whole family smiling at a beach, taken years ago, but across the surface were 3 handwritten words: "We tried. Goodbye." The engine had long cooled. Nearby wildlife had started nesting in the vehicle. There were no signs of blood, no fingerprints, and no indication of where the couple might have gone. Investigators combed the surrounding forest for days. They found remnants of a campsite, recent but abandoned. A few torn pieces of clothing, some empty food cans, and a makeshift fire pit were all that remained. Forensic teams concluded the site had been occupied no more than 2 weeks earlier. The trail ended at the river's edge, where boot prints disappeared into the mud. The possibility that the couple had drowned was considered, but no bodies were ever recovered. Despite extensive dives, speculation took over the public narrative. Some believed Nathan had murdered Emily and disappeared. Others thought Emily had willingly helped him escape. There were conspiracy theories that they'd faked their deaths and started new lives under different identities. A few even suggested Emily had orchestrated the entire thing, manipulating Nathan into carrying out her plan. Without answers, theories multiplied. The most disturbing question of all lingered in the minds of everyone following the case. If they had planned to vanish together, why kill the children? No theory seemed to fully explain that choice. It became the darkest piece of the puzzle, the one that made even the wildest speculations feel incomplete. Nearly a year passed with no credible sign of Nathan or Emily Whitaker. The story faded from headlines, but investigators never closed the case. Tips continued to trickle in from across the country: sightings in bus stations, rural diners, and remote motels, but none could be confirmed. The children's funerals had long been held, and the Whitaker home sat abandoned, its windows boarded up, its once vibrant lawn now overgrown. Maple Hollow tried to return to normal, but something about the case lingered. People spoke about it in hushed voices, always ending with the same haunting question: what really happened to Nathan and Emily? Then, without warning, a break came from the Arizona desert. A woman at a gas station near a remote off-grid community contacted local authorities after a strange couple attempted to buy supplies using only cash. They seemed frightened, worn down, and avoided eye contact. Days later, police search of the area uncovered a makeshift cabin hidden in a rocky canyon. Inside, officers found Emily alone, gaunt, and visibly traumatized. She was dehydrated and malnourished, with bruises on her arms and dirt caked into her skin. Nathan was gone. Emily was taken into custody and transported to a secure medical facility. For days, she refused to speak, but slowly, under the care of psychologists and investigators, the truth began to emerge. She claimed that Nathan had poisoned the children without her knowledge. She said he had become obsessed with the idea that the world was corrupt and evil and that their family needed to be set free from it. When she discovered what he had done, she tried to run, but he threatened her, forcing her to flee with him. She said she had lived in fear every day since, barely sleeping, always waiting for a chance to escape. Weeks before her discovery, she had slipped away during the night and survived alone in the desert, hiding in fear that he would find her. Though her story was detailed and supported by physical evidence, public opinion was sharply divided. Some believed she was a victim who had suffered in silence. Others believed she was complicit, perhaps even more involved than she let on. With Nathan still missing and many questions unanswered, the truth remains clouded. The illusion of a perfect family was destroyed, replaced by a haunting legacy of manipulation, fear, and a mystery that may never be fully solved.